just regular old market cycles and such. It's also starting to get that like elusive mainstream adoption kind of a thing. And
Right.
guess what? Looks like we are live. Hey everybody, good seeing you. We're going to go hit the intro and get right going. So hey everyone, I have the fantastic pleasure of welcoming you guys on a Thursday, which is strange because usually this is a Friday thing. I have with me my good buddy Kurt Wuckert Jr., who is sometimes frozen, sometimes not, but you know what he looks like, and it's the judge him not by the emotion in his face, but by the content of his character and what he says.
Yes, I like this.
Yes. Yes, you don't need to know what he looks like anyway. But it could be a Google Hangouts thing, whatever. Most of you, hopefully, will be listening and not just fixated on my face the whole time. But anyway, in case you didn't see it, in case you're new to the thing, we have a live crypto super chat via Cointree where you can go to cointr.ee/thedesertlinks and send a couple, bucks or whatever of whatever crypto you got and leave a message, and that'll show up in the live chat right as we're chatting, and you get to, say what you want here. There is a live YouTube chat or Facebook as well and Twitter. I do look at those, but I don't always answer, especially if I think that if I hold off long enough, you'll just be like, screw it and pay the thing so that then you can actually be heard. So it is what it is. It's tough luck. It's capitalism. It is what it is.
Yeah. It's the spam filter we need.
Spam filter we need, not the one we deserve. So let's just jump right into what's been going on. So first off, the big crypto thing not forever, but for the last few weeks or months or whatever, has been PayPal. That the payments giant has announced that they're going to be adding crypto. And the devil is in the details, which was that you're not going to be able to deposit crypto onto the service or withdraw. It's just all going to be closed loop. You can buy and sell, and it has to stay on the platform. And then you can spend it at PayPal accepting merchants, but that automatically converts to fiat. Like you don't just transfer to their balances or whatever. So it's an extremely limited rollout. So what do you think first? Do you think, I've heard a couple different takes on this. My first take was that they could not even have the crypto at all. They could just say, oh yeah, totally trust us. You own some Bitcoin. Yeah, it's like I got Bitcoins on the PayPals. And that's a super cynical one. The other perspective I've heard, which supposedly is what I believe Cash App did, which I don't use that, so I'm not super familiar with it, but is that they start it walled garden kind of thing. They start it like closed, and then they figure out all the bugs and stuff. Like they don't want people saying, oh, where did my Bitcoin go? Because he transferred it to some random address that you spelled wrong or whatever. And then they're like, sorry, I can't help you. And they're like, PayPal sucks. So the devil's advocate side of it is they're just keeping it nice and controlled while they can get people used to using this stuff. And then they're going to open it up for more advanced functionality once everything evens out, and then it'll be just a proper crypto service. So first off, what's your take on all that?
First of all, it's hard not to be cynical. We're talking about, I guess PayPal's sort of an old world, financial thing at this point. They've been around for probably 15 years, and they kind of work as a lot of people's bank. So let's bundle them into the big old world financial cabal there.
As far as is it new or old world, it's kind of like the fax machine, which is like it's old as crap, but it's like sort of electronic-y,
Right. Yeah, it's better than the telegraph.
Yeah.
So,
but not better than the coin telegraph, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Stupid pun. Keep going.
So, I look at it and I say, sure. Is it good to give people access to these sorts of things? Maybe. I don't know that giving your typical PayPal customer access to your typical basket of the approved cryptocurrencies of the mainstream. What are they going to do with it? Are they transacting with it as of yet? No, not yet. So it's being brought out as like a sort of investment vehicle on PayPal, which I also think is unwise because your typical PayPal person probably shouldn't be just chaotically and randomly investing in things either. And then, I went and I read through the documentation at PayPal. And so they sort of explain, like, what is a blockchain? What is cryptocurrency? And first of all, it was really poorly written. And second of all, I think even on top of like the English that was used to write it not being particularly precise, I also think they were sort of factually inaccurate. So that really, really worries me as to who and how this is being deployed on the back end. And this is on top of the general cynicism that we should have about Bitcoin in general, because that's also been rife with, people that are like, yeah, I'm an expert or I understand security and your coins are safe here. And then they really aren't either. So the whole thing very well may work out. PayPal certainly has the budget to hire the right people to sort of handle things appropriately, but whether or not, some fake expert of the week is able to talk his way into that position at PayPal and then just, run off with everyone's Ethereum or whatever. That's totally a thing that could happen. I wouldn't put that past anybody in such a deal, but they'll probably get stuff worked out eventually. But to segue on that, like I want to point out that PayPal was supposed to go away. Like Bitcoin was created to compete with the internet payment rails of 2008 and 9. And at the time, it really was kind of just PayPal. It was PayPal or your credit cards, I guess. But, Satoshi in the white paper very specifically said, internet commerce is the opening line of the introductory paragraph. And he goes on to talk about how the fees from the current internet economy make it that micropayments and other things are infeasible because they're too centralized. And instead of taking PayPal down, now everybody's celebrating, hey, PayPal's going to let us kind of sort of buy some cryptocurrencies on the platform. So it's also kind of bittersweet in that regard, where it's sort of a like, if you can't beat them, join them. And I don't know.
Yeah.
So double cynicism for me, I guess.
Yeah, I do. And of course, the headline being that they just started crypto trading in the U.S. So with like $20,000 a week trading limits or something like that, which is still
interesting.
I mean, it's pretty high. I mean, like how many, 5 weeks for $100,000? Like how fast is the average PayPal consumer going to be like hoarding crypto? But
yeah, that's not blue collar beer money.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as the incrementalism debate, first off, there's nothing to debate. It's happening, right? We can't just be like, well, it's happening. Doesn't matter what we think. But that being said, what I do think is I almost wonder, so this goes back to to Blockstream conspiracy theories and stuff. And I do think, like, my personal opinion on the whole Bitcoin scaling thing and Blockstream and all that is probably, the Occam's razor thing, which is the payments companies thought, oh, this is going to be big in the future. Let's try to make sure it needs our solution to continue just because we want to make some money. And hey, largely Blockstream kind of failed at that. The product sucks. No one uses Liquid. Again, not trying to defame you guys, but I'm kind of trying to defame you guys.
No, it's true. It's just, Lightning Network was supposed to have taken over everything by many years ago. Now, at this point, I think we're looking at 4 or 5 years past due on the Lightning Network promises. So
yeah, and I think
you're absolutely right.
I think that, and I almost think that like Lightning Network is more or less controlled opposition in that I don't think that Lightning makes Blockstream any money. I think that pushing off-chain solutions gets Blockstream to make money off of Liquid and things like that. And the Lightning Network was just like no, this is how we'll scale. One person doesn't run this thing. And they just kind of like let it be there. So, and it kind of, I think, took all the wind out of Blockstream sales anyway, and also promptly crashed as well. So it seems like so that's my perspective on where that came from. However, one could say that the powers that be may have tried to slow crypto adoption down enough until they could figure it out and still funnel it through the same old mechanisms. It's kind of like an acquiescence of this exists, cat's out of the bag, our days are numbered, so we have to give them something. So let's give up inflation ability, right? Let's give up the ability to just hyperinflate the currency to pay for wars and whatever else you want to pay for it.
Right.
But we'll keep everything else. Because like right now, PayPal with crypto, it's just, same old thing as before, but they've kind of, now your value doesn't necessarily tank year after year. So they gave up one thing, but they held on to the rest.
Yeah, it's savings technology. That's the new-ish narrative now of Bitcoin.
Yeah, which is funny though, because when we talk about freedom and things like that being better, and these solutions being better, decentralization is better, censorship resistance is better. It's not. Whenever you talk about these things that sound like kind of philosophical or moral kind of comments, there is a bottom line to all of that. And so, for example, if you're paying PayPal, right, to send and receive your Bitcoin and stuff, at some point you're losing money and fees to them, and at some point the decentralized alternative will be basically free, or or that'll be funny with Bitcoin, which like they have to do transact and on chain Bitcoin somehow, and the fees are going to be nasty, and I don't know how they're going to do that. Are they going to just socialize it amongst all other coins because they don't have to do much on and off chain stuff? It's almost all through their off chain ecosystem.
Maybe. Yeah.
But even then, it's like, well, why does it cost 10 cents to send my Bitcoin Cash or my Litecoin when I can just use this wallet and it's practically free? And then at some point, there's still going to be that benefit to transacting peer to peer.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've seen this. We've seen exchanges, especially smaller exchanges, will do that. They'll socialize the BTC fees onto the other coins, and exactly that. And it's a silly thing. I find it fascinating that people are so obsessed with this necessity for BTC to be the king asset and for everything to be based on it. And I understand the sort of vague arguments about it being, the big one and hashtag shelling points, but it's a very bizarre notion to sort of keep this limping asset, propped up just for, I don't even know, but like it really does lack the utility that we've really been looking for years. And so it's such a weird thing. And I think the segue that Lightning Network took, I mean, initially that was going to be it's permissionless, it's peer-to-peer and blah, blah, blah. And they realized that from a technical standpoint, and maybe even just the user base's sort of lack of technical prowess, makes it pretty impossible to deploy Lightning Network in a way that's truly decentralized also. So then that has been turned into, well, you can use Tip and Me or whatever, which is just somebody else's Lightning node, and it's not really your coins either. And then that brings us back to, well, why not just use BitPay card or any of these other things? Because if I'm going to trust a custodian somewhere, then why not trust someone that's presumably FDIC insured and other stuff like that? So I think the concept of BTC scaling off chain and all this stuff really has been, like you said, it's been deflated. It's been shot in the foot. I think all the promises that Blockstream made for this whole off chain scaling roadmap has led to exactly that. Like Coinbase has a card now, and to compete with BitPay, and you can get a Cash App card, and you get all these different things. So it's like just don't sell your BTC. Just make sure you hodl forever, and then use some Bitcoin branded Visa for your purchases, and let's forget the notion that you have any right to transact across a blockchain by yourself. And it's really sad. It's a big capitulation. So it's a bummer to see.
Yeah. Now, my perspective on that is, I think that it just became like the capitulation thing, I think was not everyone's plan. I think there were some people that really roadblocked the scaling thing. I think that SegWit 2x was the last ditch effort to just say, "Oh, let's just like get things moving," and they just lost their USA.
Yeah.
There's so many hats that the miners could not contend with the hats, and then
Right.
they just kind of accepted that as like, this is the way things are, and the rest of the ecosystem is just like, all right, we didn't want this fight, we didn't want the thing. It'd be nice if it could scale, but we've accepted that it won't for whatever reason, and we'll make do. And the rest of the world's like, well, you know what? It is still pretty good to be able to hold on to your money and no one else controls it. And it is still pretty good to be able to buy things, even though you have to pay out the ass and fees. Like, at least you can do it. Like, this is good enough. We're settling, right? It's just like, it ain't all that, but he settled down. Not everyone gets their high school sweetheart or whatever in the end, right? So I feel like they settled, and then they're just moving forward with the settlement. But as soon as
Going
Bitcoin,
home with a Friday night 4,
yeah, exactly. Friday night 4. That's going to be that should have been the title of this podcast. Friday night 4.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Friday night 4 is better than all kinds of other obscene things I could make up right now. But so I think that this is my hope. This is my hopeful, hopium is. Right now, it's really hard to get anyone to care about anything past Bitcoin and Ethereum. Not even like, what's number 3, XRP right now?
I couldn't even tell you. Yeah, I imagine it's XRP.
Yeah.
And Tether is getting dangerously close to being top 3 also.
But like, no one knows what Tether is outside of the crypto people. But like, normies have zero idea. Normies know
But
more.
it is Tether. Number 3 is Tether.
Jesus.
Yeah, by about $6 billion more Tether than XRP.
That's crazy. So literally, the number 3 top cryptocurrency is fiat, which is pretty hilarious. But
yeah,
like, let's just say, like, more people know what Dogecoin is on the street than they know what Tether is, for sure. But so people just know Bitcoin, and some people know Ethereum. And you're not going to be like, hey, coffee shop, take my, Bitcoin SV, take my Dash, take my Digibyte. They're just like, what is that? Is it Bitcoin? Well, kind of. No, they don't care. But once everyone is on Bitcoin, then they can be like, that's my hope, is that people are going to see, like, once crypto becomes relatively universal, then they're going to see, like, well, they're already comfortable with Bitcoin. And so they're going to start using the thing that also works, that works way better, but it's kind of the same. Yeah. That's just, I don't know. Do you have that kind of a hope or not?
I think, for a long time, I was a big believer that simple person to person commerce and that kind of thing was going to be the Kickstarter. And I think that it has to be part of that. Like, I like to spend Bitcoin and buy a beer or whatever, when I'm out, get the proverbial coffee that everyone must buy with their Bitcoin.
Which I do on a frequent basis, but whatever.
Yeah. And in many ways, like, that is a big part of what Bitcoin should be. But I think that the problem is that the people that said that you will regret buying that coffee with your Bitcoin rather than just holding your Bitcoin, they've unfortunately been historically accurate. If you bought a coffee in 2012 with some Bitcoin, that coffee could have bought you a decent car instead. So you look at it and you're like,
yeah, think about maybe what happens if you spend that $100 like 50 years ago. What would you got now?
Well, sure.
That? Exactly.
Well,
it's the opposite.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, it's one of those things where they have that one point on their side, and most people don't need, or at least they don't think they need, better money in their lives, because most people don't save money anyways. Most people are in colossal debt, both personally and publicly, and then we're shouldering, all of this inflation is coming right out of our ability to retire. But people don't know that. People don't understand economics. So I think in many ways we've been having the wrong conversation that, good money should be saved and bad money should be spent. And if you just hodl, like, that narrative has unfortunately been been accurate, and the people that did it have gotten wealthy from it. But then also the narrative of this, money printing has ended up being, I mean, Donald Trump printed what, $10 trillion or something in the last year by executive order and pushing this stuff out. So
it's hard to turn the crank that fast with those tiny hands, but he did it somehow.
Exactly. So now they've got all of those things of their narrative are playing in their favor. And then you look at it and say, I don't have an issue buying coffee. So then I've sort of mentally segued. I've used the word segue 3 times now. I'm going to stop using that word.
Say
but
segue instead.
I have pivoted mentally from the.
Sorry, I'll stop with the puns now.
That's all right. Puns are good. Mm-hmm. So I've pivoted my adoption goal toward, okay, like what problems can a distributed ledger solve that actually creates fundamental value in people's lives that can't be created better by something else? Well, that's 2 things. I really think that it's frictionless cross-border remittances and payments. Mm-hmm. So that would be if you're a company or basically compete with MoneyGram or be an international company or entity that needs to send money across borders easily. So that's one big one. And then the second one would be all of these sort of data integrity things. So like using the timestamp server aspect of a blockchain to hash relevant business data. So this can be everything from logistics, or it can be manufacturing, or it can be any number of things. But any time where proving where something was at a certain time adds value to that thing, a blockchain could be deployed to make that whole process better and more secure and create business value. And so,
like voting.
Voting's a great one. Everyone in my life is either convinced that everything that happened 2 weeks ago is completely fraudulent, or that fraud suddenly doesn't exist in elections, which I also find very humorous. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. We don't know who voted for who. You can't confirm whether your vote was counted. You can't confirm if it was counted 4 times or 10 times, or if your dead grandma voted again. There's no way to tell. The transparency of it is non-existent. It's completely opaque. And this is how we choose a guy that can literally blow up the entire planet. And
which, not a lot of people, few understand this, right?
Right.
And that's funny because we talk about how might as well segue into the voting thing. It's funny how, I don't pay too much attention to the intricacies of voting and stuff. I do once in a while, and that's it. But the more you hear about this, about how you do it, it's like, there's no way this thing could be secure. Like, you just show up, and then you're like, hey, I'm all right, that's me, bye. And sometimes they don't, it's contentious of whether or not you have to present ID to vote or whatever. And it just, all this nonsense, or I just write a thing in the mail and off it goes, and there's no way you verify. And it sounds horrific. And it's funny when people try to go, when they want transparency because they don't trust it, then they just put on their little MAGA hat and their American, bald eagle cape, and trot down to the the poll station, in person, and try to look around. It's so, it's just so it's so terrible.
It's madness.
Yet
it's insane.
Yet for the past, I would say somewhere around 5 years, there have been the Dash Network has been voting reliably every single month, and you can see which nodes voted. You can see what they voted for. Of course, you don't know who's behind them, but you can. And there have been people who are analyzing them and saying well, these people tend to vote for these ones and not this, because anyone behind their computer can just look at that and click oh, look, they voted for this one, they voted for that one. It's tallied. Every single node on the network can see and verify the voting results at any one time. Just anyone can do it. And then you can do cluster analysis and say oh, well, these ones all voted together. This might be one entity rather than, each individual. There's just so much auditability by random people. There's some guy I know who's just oh, I'm going to start this thing called MNO Watch, where he watches master nodes and so tries to figure out who voted for what and their voting patterns and stuff like that. And and then of course the the Dash Core team is, Arizona State University is doing some research on applying zero knowledge proofs to voting, so you could ascertain that nodes voted, but you can't tell which node voted for what, just in case you start to have to register a node as like in your company or whatever like that.
Sure.
So it's like this stuff is possible, and this is like a project that's meant to be like a money that's just working on this stuff, but just happens to have a voting component. And imagine if you just like threw a couple billion, which is like peanuts, into making a secure blockchain voting thing that literally anyone in the US or not in the US, right? So then you don't have to have UN observers come in and like wear their little stupid blue helmets and sniff around. Like they can stay wherever they're at and just get up, run a node and just be like, all right, looks good to me.
Yeah.
And just there you go. Like how fantastic would that be?
And that's exactly it. Like the app, I mean, billions? I don't even think billions would be necessary, because we can do, first of all, there's all kinds of ways to attest identity to people. Like there are KYC companies that do this professionally. We can set it up. It could be much like setting up an exchange account. You send your selfie and you send your ID, and then they give you back a hash. You can connect it to your Bitcoin keys, and you do all these things. Like you can have 3 or 4 attestations of provable identity, and then you get a single vote for that identity. And then it's instantly tabulated also. So like the whole thing, like the election could be done the moment the polls close, in which case also there would be no even attempt at fraud for, let's push through another, bring that whole bucket of ballots through even though the polls are closed, and that kind of, like, it's just over. It's tabulated. You can instantly know who the next everything is at every level of government. And I think the real problem is, first of all, it's not a technical problem. It's a social problem. And we're asking criminals to institute a more transparent system into how they're elected. Yeah. So that's the real issue right there, is that these people are going to be dragged kicking and screaming.
Yeah,
and
the real issue is you're trying to kill millions of jobs, Kurt. That's the real. Who will count all the votes and stuff? But like,
we do need poll workers; they're essential.
Yeah, but like a little thing like this, right? If this is access to your crypto stuff that's like offline, what's to prevent there from being some kind of a key storage embedded in your ID, and then your voting key is like a 2 of 3 multisig. Where you have that, you have a biometric, and then you have something in your head and then so if you don't have I lost my ID, I'm gonna go weak, and I'm gonna put in my little special code. Just like people use like social security numbers for some reason for ID purposes and stuff, but like something like that's not like sent around like a Friday Night 4, but you knew that would come back. But so you have like your number and then your ID and you're good. Or like, oh wait, I do the fingerprint, and then you can vote from your computer. You stick in the little card, you plug in your little USB port that you get your little adapter for your ID. You stick that in, you write out your little code, and you're done. And then, I'm sure that there's always downsides to everything. Now, so we have a Sam we saw says in the live chat, which he should have used the crypto live chat, but I'll take it. Didn't Peter McCormack lose the lawsuit to Craig Wright? I have not been keeping up with Craig Wright's many lawsuits, so I'd call you my expert on this subject.
Sure, as an expert on all things BSV, I'm actually not, but But so Peter. Here's what happened. Peter had his funding pulled. He was being paid, or his defense rather, was being paid for by Tether Corporation. Tether Corporation has pulled their funding. So they said, Peter,
why did Tether fund him? That doesn't make any sense.
That's a good question, isn't it? So basically because Tether agrees that Craig is not Satoshi, and that's the nature of the suit, is that Peter specifically called out Craig on social media and said, hey, sue me, asshole. And Craig's like, I will sue you. Like, I'm suing people for libeling me and telling me that I'm a fraud and that the claims about Satoshi Nakamoto are legally fraudulent. So if you want to be sued for that, Peter, by all means, I'll sue you. And Peter responded back like, yes, you're a fraud. You're a liar. You're not Satoshi Nakamoto. I think you're, XYZ. Peter really laid it on. Well, Peter got served a lawsuit from Craig Wright's attorneys. And then Tether stepped up almost instantly because Peter is not a wealthy man. And Tether said, we side with Peter and we are going to fund him till the bitter end. So it was essentially Craig's money versus Tether's money in the court of law on a libel suit. And Tether quietly pulled the money back from Peter after seeing the evidence. So I find that fascinating. So it will likely be settled. Basically, Peter, I want to say this right because these things have changed a couple of times, but I believe Peter wanted to essentially withdraw and basically say, hey, can we just wash our hands of this? And probably offered to issue like a public apology or something like that. And basically wants to just squash it and go away and, run away with his tail between his legs. But frankly, it's up to Craig whether or not he'll accept that.
Yeah,
so if Craig,
he seems like a vindictive person, so I doubt that it's going to go that way.
Well, and it's personal to him. So, it could go very, very poorly for Peter, especially if doesn't have any funding anymore. And if the people who see the funding or who have the funding have seen the evidence and see that it's a loser, so I think Peter is unfortunately in some pretty big trouble. However, Peter and I have a pretty contentious relationship between ourselves personally. He likes to pick on me for being bald, which I find a little bit unprofessional. So, among other things. So Peter and I disagree about a number of things pretty vehemently, but he likes to make things personal. So that's what you get, unfortunately, when you're not nice to people, Peter.
Yes.
But I don't think it's going to end well for him.
He and I have a contentious relationship as well. Not much of a relationship at all, but it is contentious. The biggest point of contention is I responded to a tweet of his by saying, "Okay, boomer," and he insists that I look older than him. So,
I don't know about that. Peter's got some city miles on him. So
city miles. Yep, city miles and Friday Night 4.
Yeah, well, Peter's been very public about his struggles with addiction in the past. I think he was a very serious drug user, into the rock and roll scene and stuff in England. And I don't fault him for any of that. Like, by all means, your body, your choice. But he likes to moralize over people. So I think there'll kind of be a lot of people that are excited to see him taken down a notch when it does indeed happen. So.
Yeah, and that's a thing where, disagreeing with him, I have no problem with him, believing in some goofy things. The thing I don't like about him is that he's mean and dishonest publicly a whole lot, which I do not think should be a crime. I think it should basically get you ridiculed at most, but or business relationship severed. Now, which makes me torn, because if he gets screwed by this lawsuit, I don't think that's right. But there's something karmic about it too. So not my monkeys, not my circus. Am I right?
Yeah, well, for sure. And I feel the same way about it. If I was the person being personally libeled, I may feel different about it. But as a rule, I see those sort of things. I have thick skin. I don't know. I don't know what it would take to actually make me get angry. But again, I've always been the big guy. I've always been loud. I was kind of the popular kid in school and all of that. So I think for me, jabbering monkeys, I'm always just kind of okay, do something. I fight for fun, guys. Let's do this. Yeah. So, but there's a big difference. Someone like Craig, first of all, Craig is a very fiery and passionate person, but I don't see him as being particularly good traditionally at probably making a whole lot of friends, because he's just a unique fellow, and he's been a computer science guy for a long time, and I could see him maybe just not I mean, certainly not liking the criticism. Even, whether or not any of it's true, like, people are not nice to him. And when there's a lot of people not nice to you for a long time, that wears on you. I mean, he went a long time without ever threatening to sue anyone or actually suing one. So after 4 or 5 years of all of the people in your industry where you make money, like, agreeing in chorus that you are some kind of a fraud and you're bad for the space and you're bad for the industry that you work in, like, at some point, I think you do have to plant a flag. And I think that's a bit what's happening here. Like, hey, I can't just debate people on Twitter all day. They have decided, maybe collusively, that I'm the bad guy, and it's time to fight back. So I can't say I blame him, even though it's probably not the way I would have handled things personally.
Yeah. Well, anyway, next thing we got to go to is the DCG IPO. So Digital Currency Group, which is basically the many-headed hydra of crypto investing things. It has its fingers in just about every pie out there.
Yeah, they're headquartered on the Death Star, for the record.
Yes. They got an IPO coming up, and Messari says it could easily fetch $4 billion. So, initial thoughts on this?
My initial thoughts are that Digital Currency Group are the worst people in the space. And the CEO is Barry Silbert, who is somebody that people are semi-aware of. But if you actually look at their board of directors, you will see former Federal Reserve chairman. You will see people that are insider advisors to the Clintons. You'll see people that are involved in weird aspects of the bank state monopoly, are all in charge of things over at Digital Currency Group. So then you have to ask yourself, is it a good thing that they are the biggest and most heavily invested venture capital firm in the Bitcoin space? And then actually go look at their portfolio, and it is the absolute who's who of everything. They are a majority partner in businesses like Blockstream and Lightning Labs. They're also a majority partner in places like Ripple Labs and Abra and Coinbase and Kraken. And you keep going down this list of things, and you realize, holy cow, they have big interest in all kinds of ways, or in all kinds of communities that you thought were competing against each other. But at the end of the day, the money is all filtering up to Barry Silbert and his cabal of banking interests. So when people talk about Digital Currency Group, you really start to look at it and say, is any of this decentralized at all? Because it seems like every major developer, exchange, wallet tool, or almost anything you use in the crypto space is in some way lining the pockets of DCG. And so to talk about them doing an IPO, I'm sure it will be a massive IPO. It'll probably be a great buy, but you have to realize that if anybody in the space are the bad guys, it's Digital Currency Group and frankly, in my opinion, anyone associated to them. So that's they're the bad guys in very short.
Now, were they, from your recollection, associated with the Segwit 2X agreement? Weren't they like...
They were.
Yeah.
So they played both sides. They were big funders of really all the major players in Segwit 2X, but they're majority funders in the whole small block side too. So I sort of feel like the whole thing, and it's not a bizarre theory to say that maybe the whole thing was manufactured to go exactly the way that it went, and to split off, the real big blockers, to get rid of initially the Bitcoin cashers and the BSV people and the people that really wanted it to just scale and not need Digital Currency Group owned solutions, which again, I encourage everybody, if you're listening, go look at the portfolio page.
I was just there.
Yeah,
they alphabetize
it's everyone.
It's like, well, this is the A's and this is the B's. Like, it just goes on and on. And I think it's very, I guess that is an astute thing to think that, because, Blockstream is just one of these companies under them. You also have, for example, Coinbase, and you have Coinbase being used as a mode of payment, right? Where now you can pay with Coinbase, where you don't have to do actual on-chain when you pay at a merchant sometimes. You just pay with your Coinbase account and it transfers on their shared ledger or whatever. And so it's clear that there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. Now, I think that DCG is honestly too big to have a focused agenda, if you know what I mean. As in, I think they just want to own everything and then see how it goes, more or less. Because as long as they own everything, it doesn't matter who wins under them. It's just kind of like if one goes into, the more conspiratorial side of U.S. politics, if you say if it doesn't matter if red or blue wins, is the deep state always wins kind of attitude. Whereas it doesn't matter if Blockstream or the Segwit2x wins. It just, the only thing that matters is they control things.
Right.
Now, one thing that I think was interesting, which this is complete, I would say, I'm sorry for hearsay, it's completely anecdotal. For the longest, so they own CoinDesk as well, or they're heavily invested in CoinDesk or whatever. CoinDesk being the formerly number one crypto publisher thingy. I think Cointelegraph kicked their ass recently. They got their own thing going on, but so CoinDesk has in the past. This is where my personal kind of experience intersects with that. For the longest time, had a clear vendetta against Dash. Now they were always known as the respectable sort of voice, or like just super corporate, but then they'd publish these like really poorly thought out things on Dash and just say like, it sucks. We talked to some guy and they said that just like the most, where a couple times the CEO of Dash Core team, which Dash Core Group has the same initials as Digital Currency Group, funny enough, Illuminati confirmed, had literally just like a 20 tweet long tweet storm saying everything that they got objectively factually wrong in this one article and stuff, and they never issued a retraction. And including when Zencash at the time, Horizon now, which is Horizon Labs, is in the Digital Currency Group portfolio, by the way. When they got 51% attacked, they put in some kind of a solution, which basically the longer a miner takes to publish a block, the more penalizing as proof of work it gets. So it makes it harder to 51% attack stuff by just doing a bunch of mining in secret and then publishing the blocks. And it doesn't make it impossible. It just, and they put this big article on number 90 something on CoinMarketCap's, project there. And then Dash came out with a solution that made it essentially impossible unless you compromise the whole masternode network. And then they just wouldn't, even though we repeatedly, that was back when I was doing PR stuff with Dash, they ghosted. They just did not want to cover that at all. And then all of a sudden, and also of course, Dash was excluded from Coinbase forever. And then Dash got on Coinbase. And first off, I don't know if it's a way of like getting Litecoin and other coins a head start, by just, or who knows. Again, now we're going to conspiracy territory. But whatever it is, when Dash got included, since that point, there have been no Dash hit pieces on CoinDesk, because now it's part of the Dash is not. There's no, now
portfolio.
It's in the portfolio somehow.
Right.
Welcome to the portfolio, sir.
Right. Yeah. It's doors open, eyes wide shut. Put your mask on.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of what was the group in John Wick with the hotel and all that stuff. I forget what they call it.
What do they call it?
I don't know.
It's gone.
Something like the Guild, but something fancier. But I do remember.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Excommunicado. Ooh. Right. And then you're just dead. They give you, they let you run out the door.
Cut scene to the bureaucrats on their typewriters.
Yeah. So what do you think this IPO means for the space?
Well, it means more money in Barry Silbert's pocket, which is the long story of Digital Currency Group. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else it means. I mean, it's just one more thing that, they're treating it as and what I mean by it, I mean the space. They're treating the cryptosphere as just some other asymmetric thing to invest in, this bucket of equities or something, which, more money, whatever, but we're not solving the fundamental problems. We're not seeing adoption by almost anybody in any meaningful way that brings value to it. So it's I don't know. I don't know that it's a good thing at all unless you're a digital currency group insider. So not a fan. I'm a big fan of building real tools on a distributed consensus that solve global problems, and that's not something we've seen almost anybody pursue. And that's a real shame.
Yes. Now, I do have to say, part of me does not mind them getting stronger in the context of, first off, crypto becoming more mainstream, because then the bigger the pie is, the harder it is for one entity to control most of it, in my view. But also, the Binance gang is not part of that, and they're getting pretty strong. And so it's just like from the balance of power theory kind of thing, like Binance owning CoinMarketCap now, and being just such a titanically large exchange, and then clearly like we saw over the Hive Steemit, the Steemit takeover, and then the Steem fork, as we saw with that, clear collusion with a few other exchanges and stuff like that. And there's some other shenanigans going on that I won't mention them when the time is right. But basically, you have these giant players that just, I do what I want. But you got like one could call the Binance thing, like say the China cartel, and then like the US cartel. And it's just sort of like, China. It's like the same old thing. You got the, and then. So I don't know, maybe it's a good thing that the space has another big strong entity, or maybe if it weren't for that, it would be more united decentralization versus the more centralized entities. I don't know. Maybe there's just too much, conspiracy theory kind of postulating over just what is just like companies and investments and stuff just going up. But
perhaps.
Speaking of politics, how do you like them Bitcoin Cashes these days?
Well, that's isn't that the question? I'm excited to see it split again over the weekend. Let's do that in short. I've been saying for years now that I used to be a huge Bitcoin Cash supporter. I used to host the Chicago Bitcoin Cash meetup. I did all kinds of stuff there. When the drama started between BCH and BSV people, resulted in a very contentious hard fork. And we're coming up to that anniversary. I'm hosting the BSV Hash War anniversary party outside of Chicago. If anybody wants to come hang out, there will be free food and free BSV handed out and all that jazz. But the whole thing is funny because I have said for a long time, way before this was talked about publicly, that Amaury Sachet wishes that Bitcoin Cash was Dash. He wants to be paid out of the block reward. He's been saying this quietly for a very long time. And now the last 6 months or 9 months or whatever, it's been much more public. But he's been saying this since the very beginning. And he was offered jobs to work at other places. Like, Amaury, can we just pay you in a way that's more reasonable? And it's just always been, no, pay me out of the block reward. And now it seems like everyone is finally sick of his shenanigans. But I... And others have been saying that this is how the Bitcoin Cash experiment would completely fall apart, because there's too many rebellious people that think they're in charge of Bitcoin Cash. And I think it's just going to continue to fork and fork and fork and just create split after split that just makes it irrelevant over time. And I think it's really interesting. Bitcoin ABC is the flagship. It's the reference client of Bitcoin Cash today. And they're it seems like, looking at the hash power and everything else, that Bitcoin ABC is going to be forked into its own coin, and that BCHN node is going to be the new vanguard of Bitcoin Cash. And that'll be a first time precedent.
Yeah.
But then the other interesting thing is that we saw how they handled things in the BCH BSV hash war, and like renting hash and playing all kinds of really, really underhanded games doesn't really bug anybody. So I wouldn't count ABC out entirely yet either, because who knows who's in Amaury Sachet's pocket? There
or
might
vice
be.
versa.
Well, right. So they're, in my opinion, a bunch of crooks at this point, and crooks cut each other's throats. And so I think we could see some really crazy fireworks. But aside from that sort of overview, I haven't been paying real close attention to what's going on over there either. Do you have any inside info, Joel?
Yeah, sort of. Not really inside info, but I try to everything I look at. The problem is when you get too close, you care too much, you start to get lost on the details of the facts and don't see the big picture. And I feel like I get a great sense of personal gratification when I see big pictures. I understand concepts is like a bigger thing. Like, oh, this is what happens when this happens. That's the reason. And it's not like, well, this turned out this way because I'm like, no, I wanted to, anyway. I just put out a video before, I think it was last night, where basically I recapped, a few interviews with BCH people, but basically ended with the conclusion that the reason so we have Bitcoin Cash has been involved with 3 chain splits so far. Big, which is, which is about one every year. It's the annual tradition in forking off, which is kind of funny. Fork off from BTC, BSV getting forked off, and ABC forking off. And this is the only one where the top dev team, the legacy team, lost, right? If one could consider that. And obviously the BSV split was much more even, and it was much more, it wasn't like BSV lost. It just became its own thing with, valuation-wise, the minority fork, right? Hash power-wise, a minority fork. But still, it wasn't quite as the same. Whereas Bitcoin Cash forked off from Bitcoin, that was a significant minority, and then it's going to be an even more significant minority this time. What makes things different? Why did the legacy team lose? And basically I just said it's all about risk and profit, where the core team, BTC core, right, they have been doing their job, whatever that job entails, a different story, but they've been doing it for a decade, right? And different people have come and gone, but still Bitcoin's been stable, technically stable since then. And instability is uncertainty, and people don't like that. People really, it doesn't matter their opinions, they shy away from that. And the second thing is profit, is as the established, starting with the stability, then you get the ticker, and then therefore it'll be worth more money, so therefore I'm going to go side with that one. And, the same thing with ABC. When, when Bitcoin SV split off, it's going against the established dev team that was, track record aside, it just at least kept the ship together. And then it's like, well, who are these new people? I don't know. And therefore, like Roger and all in Bitcoin.com and all the infrastructure and like money and stuff is all on that side. So it's like, okay, this is the safer bet. Now with ABCs, this time, first, there's 2 huge differences. First, Bitcoin Cash node was operating software. It wasn't like SegWit2x, like, oh, we'll figure it out. It was like, no, this is working now. So which one is more stable? I mean, ABC more track record, but it's not. It's like a minimum threshold. It's not like this is so stable. It's just like 5 times as stable as stable. No, you just want stable, right? So you got you're stable versus stable, but then you got to pay money to these guys. And that was the big one that just like, nope. Like, opinions aside, I'm gonna just run the thing that doesn't cost me money. And then it just turned out that way. So now we know how all forks in the future will resolve, where you have, the one who's going to win is the stable one that, at least short term is in people's economic best self-interest.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, I think that's fair. Like it's a very shrewd way to look at it, and just say that, obviously people are just going to act in their own rational self-interest. So I think in the short term, with everything the way it is, the crypto economy being what it is, like, I think you're absolutely right. People are just going to pursue the most profit, period.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, I mean, that makes
yeah.
sense. The thing is, long-term profit is profit, but it's just not profit yet. So, for
Right.
example, if you get to be a minority, and so this is what Amari's point of view is he still wants ABC. Like, at this point, it's probably not worth the trouble from where I'm looking at the amount of hash rate that they stand to gain. It's probably like the IFP is probably not like enough to buy him a couple of coffees or something. It's like not a lot, probably.
Yeah, it
So,
doesn't seem that way.
but his whole thing is the development, the stuff that we can build with some funding is so valuable that who cares if we get like 10% of the valuation or whatever. Over time, the market cap will overtake BCH, for example. And that's sort of also the idea of, I would argue BSV versus up to BTC is
Sure.
the value proposition of this. It doesn't matter if it's a pittance compared right now. Over time, this lack of economic sense, like making sense economically, is definitely going to reverse because you provide real utility, and over a long enough gain, enough companies, blah, 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 it works. So that's kind of the but here's the other thing. I think that this is my oversimplification of Nakamoto consensus, which I'll have to be I'll say it in the crude kind of a way first, and then, or like rudimentary way, and then nuance it a little bit. It's centralized or it forks, and that triggers a lot of people. I mean that the decisions have to be made. It's clear who makes the decisions, or it forks. That's the way to making it. That when you come to a decision, it forks. So BTC was developed by a bunch of different people, and at some point, the group of developers, the Blockstream crew who took over the Bitcoin core team, that ended up jettisoning the other people, and now those people decide where it goes. So it's centralized in a way, and then or it forks. Now, ABC decide, it's centralized, or it forks, right? Forked off to BSV,
Right.
and now, I don't know too much about BSV internal politics. I've heard some people rumbling about that there's a little bit of a opinion divide between the N-chain people and then the Craig Wrights and Calvinaires and the business people of it. But I've not heard anything approaching there might be a fork. So I'm going to just ignore that until that becomes a thing, if it becomes a thing. But then ABC versus, ABC wants to look, we want to run the show. We want to be paid to run the show. Forks. And then there you go. Litecoin never fork because Charlie runs the thing, right?
Right.
Monero did not fork until they made a decision to just, completely change the proof of work algorithm. Then all of a sudden 5 forks spring out of there and it just goes kaboom. And then it's like, now you know who owns Monero. Yeah, it stays there. And I guess Digibyte is small enough that no one cares enough to make big decisions. It's not and then now Dash has had a few people disagree, people disagree with its direction. And I remember the big one was in late 2016. A bunch of people didn't like some of the core team's dealings, some business dealings and stuff. And so they I think they put in some sort of a proposal to say, screw these guys. And it failed miserably. So instead of forking, they just left and joined PivX. And so that was PivX's big boom, was those people coming in and doing all that stuff. But it didn't fork because you have an actual governance thing that decides that in some way or another. But if you start going down the list, Ethereum, centralized or it forks. Well, it wasn't centralized, and then Ethereum Classic now it kind of is, I guess. And it doesn't mean it's central. It just means when the rubber hits the road at the most important decisions, someone has to decide. Because if Vitalik says, we're going to do this, no one's going to say no. And if they do, they're going to fork. That's just how it works.
I think that's an interesting way to put it. I don't think that it's wrong. And I also think that a lot of people think of that word centralization or, centralized as a dirty word really unnecessarily, because there's nothing wrong with functioning in unison. Like,
Yeah.
not everything in the universe can be decentralized. So, I mean, just by virtue of the fact that we like to use digital currency makes us of a certain worldview in many regards. So there's like a centralization of ideology in that regard. But everybody talks about it like it's a dirty word. And I think it's silly, because the decentralization aspect of Bitcoin, and then by proxy everything else, is a security feature. Like, these things exist simply so that the ledger can remain not prone to attacking and having a single point of failure. But I think, in my opinion, looking at any of these situations, like, to even have like maybe 10 geographically located nodes would be totally sufficient for sufficient decentralization relative to the value of the project, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, decentralization is one of those things that I think is just really horribly misunderstood, and it's been a big reason for the forks, actually.
Yeah.
So everybody's, no, you can't do that, it'll centralize. God forbid we only have 50 miners as opposed to millions of them. And it's like, why do we need millions of miners, or even tens of thousands? Like, Satoshi was very clear in, like, I think it was 2009. I mean, he disappeared in 2010, and he definitely said that he doesn't ever see there being a reason for there to be more than 100,000 nodes ever.
So
And
even that's a lot.
well, it is a lot, but it's
Yeah.
not that many more than we have right now. But he even specified that he sees most of those only just being light clients, and then millions of users. But
Yeah.
this notion of every person should be a node, and all of this stuff that kind of came out of the small block narrative, I think is counterintuitive. It's unhealthy, and I think it's been a big problem for adoption, because they've failed to scale because of the limitations of everybody needing to be a node. That means that the threshold for the power of that node needs to be very low, and then everybody suffers. So I think it's wise to call out centralization as not necessarily the bad thing, and centralization of thought actually could be quite good as far as adoption goes.
Yeah, or consensus.
No, well, right.
Consensus and centralization are so the thing when you talk about centralization, it can be of what is always a big answer, big question following that.
Sure.
So, well, and here's the thing: what we don't like about the fiat system is one group decides what the money is money and what isn't, and prints some and all that kind of stuff. We don't like that the same group is in the government, even though the Federal Reserve is not technically part of the government-ish.
Right.
But and then neither are the banks that process your payments, but it's still one entity just says shut it all down and you're toast. That's what we don't like. And so I was thinking about like the Electric Coin Company, for example. They develop for Zcash. They now, I think half of the block reward of the subsidy block reward part goes to them, and the other, or something like half goes to them and half goes to a major grants group that no one from the Zcash Foundation or Electric Coin Company is on their board, some other thing like that. But for the most part, a company, a single group of people runs Zcash. They decide what's built, they decide how it's built, they decide how the thing runs, etc., etc. But no one needs their permission to use Zcash at the same time. Anyone can run a node, anyone can do the stuff, anyone can transact without their permission. They can't censor transactions. And so now, of course, if someone said, hey, if like the government took them over and said, hey, why you need to put something in the code that does like a backdoor for the NSA or whatever, and obviously it's open source, so everyone would see it, and they would have the choice to either like run that or split it off. Like that is still a risk. But for the most part, it doesn't matter if a centralized company runs this stuff as long as what they run is not centralized. Now, can we get better? Possibly. But the problem is when you have something that's like up in the air, you have regulatory capture. So it's one of those things where, you decide like the permissionlessness of it. And that kind of works out like that. So, and speaking of governance, I'll quickly go over this and then we can mention what's up in the BSV world real quick. I know we're dragging on a little long because it just happens that way. But
Sure.
right now there's a vote going on for the Dash Treasury Reallocation thing. Basically, up until now, every time people decide to fund things through the Dash Treasury, coins are created. And if you don't spend the 10% that's allocated for that, coins are just not created. They just never get created. And so as a result, anytime you fund a proposal, including development, you are inflating the currency a little bit and you're paying for it in devaluation via that. And every time you don't spend something, obviously your coins become more scarce and therefore it's good. However, people don't see this, right? They just think, oh, it's free money. So there's been a lot of really stupid proposals that have been funded over the years because people see this as free money and we got to spend it all. So basically with this there's a proposal in right now that or two proposals that accomplish this same goal, which is to make the actual supply fixed and predictable. Whereas like right now, the ultimate supply of Dash could be different depending on how much gets spent every month. And any leftover funds, rather than not being created, are distributed to masternodes and miners. So it's literally the exact same thing, except you actually see what you're saving or spending. And so it aligns your incentives a little bit better. So you actually see, well, I spent this much. I could have gotten this much more in my rewards, which they were already doing before, but now you can see it. Now, the only difference is right now, it's like whatever savings get passed on would be like equally split between miners and masternodes. That's what Dash Core Group wants to do. But then a group of masternodes disagreed and they put their own proposal in, or they kind of both came together to competing proposals. And this one has a very small nuance where it just says the miners will get a fixed percentage no matter what happens. And we, the masternodes, will take all the risk and all the reward for the treasury spending. As in, if we spend a whole bunch, we'll eat the cost and the miners don't get any of the costs. But if we save a lot, we'll get paid more and they won't get the benefits of our thing. So it's a very interesting, like a lot of people feel very strongly about this. And I think it's really fascinating because I think they're both the step in the right direction. I'm not sure which I like more because on the one hand,
they both sound like pretty good ideas generally. Like it's not like a good idea and a bad idea. It's like, both are okay.
That's exactly it. Because on the one hand, you have masternodes, which make all the decisions, standing to, if they make a decision for the benefit of the network, of the whole network pays. But they're the only ones that get to make the decision. On the other hand, they're the ones who get to make the decision. They're the ones that take all the risk and the reward, but it could possibly benefit the whole network. And even though they have to pay exclusively for it. So it's like, which one is better? I don't know. I really don't know. One thing's for sure, though, is the masternode only plan makes them more stingy because they more acutely feel the risk of spending and, the benefits of saving. Now, the question, both proposals already will make them more stingy. The question is, will this make them too stingy? Or will it make them better? Because even at what point is the Goldilocks just right bit of masternode stinginess?
Yep.
We're about to find out, but I'm very excited on seeing how that turns out. But again, the vote's going to be over in, the 25th, I think. Again, because people have been talking about, the election, November 3rd. Okay, I don't care about that one. I don't care about the one on the 15th, the Bitcoin Cash one, and I care about the 25th one for Dash. Those are the ones that excite me, that I'm looking at and trying to learn from. So, that being said, you said there's some cool stuff going on in BSV. I don't think we ever covered exactly what those things were, but...
Yeah. So, I think one thing that sets BSV apart is most projects are having protocol development discussions, like, right now with Dash. Like these are sort of consensus rule kind of things, The same with Bitcoin Cash. It's, hey, we're going to split the chain. And, so there's all this action happening with the protocol developers. And BSV is very different because the protocol is set in stone. All of the parameters in the protocol are open. They are up to miner settings. So you want to mine a 500 megabyte block? You want to mine a 10 gigabyte block? Go for it. Software won't make it fork, maybe you'll get screwed, but you have that option. Op return is wide open. The child pays parent limit, blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that is limited on most other chains in the software at the consensus level is not limited in Bitcoin or Bitcoin SV specifically. So that means that the exciting stuff isn't really happening with the node team. The node team is doing minor tailoring on things, and the miners are competing for big blocks and block rewards and fees and all of that. But the cool stuff that is allowed to grow there is a whole bunch of things. It's the businesses that look at Bitcoin SV as a data ledger for business. So these are your basic, the companies that people know. This is like Twetch and Streamanity are kind of cool. Twetch is a Twitter competitor, right? With everything on chain, right? It's everybody's moving to Parler or whatever. But I've been on Twetch for a year now, so I'm that guy.
I'm very close to going Twetch broke though. I'm like 72 cents. So we'll see. I might have to stop using it if I run out.
I'll shoot you a tip.
Okay, I gotta what do they call it? Twetch bag. I just chicka, my money button.
Please help.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. Tonic Pow is a really cool project. It's about putting advertisement on chain and instant payouts for people that share links, and it makes for much more transparent affiliate link programs and stuff like that. And those are basics. I should make it's not super unknown or well known, but I do freelance work for CoinGeek, but I'm going to be taking on much more freelance work for CoinGeek, I'm basically taking on the role of like Bitcoin historian over there. So that's an exciting thing on my front.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it'll encompass all kinds of different things from a media standpoint. So that's pretty cool. But then looking a little further, we just had the CoinGeek conference, and there's some big companies that are doing some really interesting things and using BSV as the data layer. So we just one of them is a company called Geospock. Big company. What Geospock does is data science, specifically in the IoT space, but it's the IoT space as it pertains to location data. So this is something that would be relevant to, let's say, a self-driving car, rather than specifically just using cameras and LiDAR, that it'll also have oracles that are telling the car where it is in relation to the road, so that even if the car malfunctions, that the road can help the car do the right thing anyways. The problem is that it starts to become a lot of vectors for hacking and things like that to really cause chaos on a citywide thing. So it's important to have your security set up properly. Well, Geospock is working with specifically with nChain. nChain acquired some of Geospock, and they're specifically their blockchain partner in developing some of these smart road technologies and stuff like that, and using the data on the blockchain to secure people's keys and their identity and make sure that it's all cryptographically nailed down so that it's impervious to hack. So that's something that I don't see happening on any other blockchain because, well, they're like Ethereum accidentally hard forked the other day. And, maybe there will be ETH 2.0 and maybe there will be another Bitcoin Cash. But meanwhile, BSV is stable and reliable for business. And therefore, big global companies are like, hey, I hated Hyperledger, but let's see if BSV works. And so there's stuff like that going on.
And that's something that I do see a lot of value in. So we're talking about, let's just go back to the American founding for a second, because this is somehow relevant. The entire concept of the American constitutional government was government sucks. It's evil. It's terrible. But if we don't have government, we're going to get a government, and it's going to be bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the shittiest government possible, beat them to the punch. And just, well, again, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but basically just say, I'm going to put in the most chained, limited, small, teeny government.
This is the preamble of the Constitution, word for word.
Making the shittiest government possible. Anyway, so you put in the most restrained government possible because you're kind of cynical about the ability for there to be no government. but you basically want it as close to that as possible. And then it just, the least you can get away with, you go away with. And that's kind of the way I view, governance systems. I've been a big proponent of crypto governance forever, obviously, because without it, you get all kinds of problems. But as a minimalist on that, right? And because one of the biggest problems that I think that Dash had over the years was too much of it went through the Treasury. Too much of it went through the governance process, the bureaucracy, as it were. And it's very stable, but not super efficient. And I actually thank Amari Sachet for pointing this out on, that specific point. And I think that once you have people be much more stingy with this kind of stuff, you'll have far fewer proposals, far fewer of things will go to the bureaucratic system to try to get passed, and more things will be gone through like Kickstarter type things or businesses or things like that. Everything will run a lot more efficiently. And so, yeah, I do believe that once you basically don't have those main problems, once you just don't have those main problems of, forking and fighting and all those kinds of things, as soon as you can quiet that down, the more you can just not deal with governance, the better. Your frame is frozen for a second, Curry. Do you still hear me? Yeah.
Oop,
I
there we go.
Now. There we go. You got back.
Yeah.
I did get we did get a super chat, by the way.
Nice.
Oh, it got cut off a little bit, but I will read it for you. What does Kurt think of the analogy that no one pays 100% of their income to security guards, but that the Bitcoin forks, except with ABC, all believe that this same concept? Wouldn't you want to find the lowest you could pay the miners while maintaining hash rates and still benefiting miners because other funds would go to the steady devs and marketing? Let me see if I can translate that a little bit. Basically, I'm pretty sure what that means is the reason you pay miners is for security. At some point, as long as you're not going to get forked, security, once you're secure, like overpaying for security doesn't get you more. It's like, what do you think of the idea of being able to pay enough for security to where you're going to be secure, and then having the rest on top of that do other things with? I guess that's how I interpret this, at least.
I think so. I actually think the premise of the question is flawed. Like we're not just paying miners for security, and frankly, the we in that is a little bit like, this is like that communist meme, like it's our security, so it's like miners are paid by their work, period. Like I believe that the free market of mining should be that whoever can mine the best deserves the most block rewards. But that block reward is also a subsidy. That's like the communist aspect of Bitcoin that was built into it to bootstrap it in the first place. The actual thing that we need to transition to with Bitcoin is blocks that are large enough to accept fees that replace that block reward. Mm-hmm. So miners need to figure that out, because miners are the governance model in Bitcoin too. And it's in their best interest long term. And like we have super passive, hardcore cucked miners in Bitcoin across the board that just are like, keep feeding me that subsidy, man. Every 10 minutes, I want that subsidy right down my throat. And that's a super bad precedent. If there's one thing wrong with Bitcoin, I think it's that the subsidy is too long. The halvening schedule is way too drawn out. I think they need a tighter ticking time bomb, or perhaps it would have been better to have a tighter ticking time bomb to make it that, hey, we need to figure out ways to parallelize block validation, grow block size, block propagation needs to happen more efficiently. We need to figure out how to make it that 7 billion people can transact across the network so that we have terabyte blocks that are full of hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fees, so that we incentivize people to use the network. And so the security of hash power is part of it, but they're also the governance mechanism. And if they were governed in a proof of work system that actually was balanced for people to use the network, I don't think that there is a diminishing return. That's how it should be. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're living in this bizarre parenthetical where it's just more profitable to just mine for block rewards and keep the blocks small and
Mine
all of
empty
that.
blocks.
Exactly. We see mining empty blocks on all the Bitcoin forks because that's still the most profitable thing to do as a miner. And, they're pursuing that profit, but that can't last forever. And if it does last forever, then Bitcoin, frankly, was a bad idea. It failed in implementation and originally, if that's the case. So I think it's one of those things where that money doesn't belong to developers. It doesn't belong to the users. It is the reward for properly securing the network and properly growing its actual value to be used. So it's their money. This is like me saying, "Hey, do you deserve all that money that you work for every day?" Like this is the argument for like having a taxation system and a redistribution system because other people need that money too. I think it's a slippery slope to make those assumptions about stuff that's earned by other people's work.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about the block reward is I'd almost like to call it. So people call like a treasury system or a dev tax or things like that. They call it like a block subsidy, which is true, but I would also call that what the miners get is the subsidy because it's not they're not being paid by people who largely. I mean, there's been a couple times you had like 20% or so of the block reward in BTC has come from fees a couple times. Ethereum passed 50% for a little bit when their fees were insane, which I don't think that's sustainable, but whatever. But eventually, I should transition to a fully fee-based model. And I guess is deciding what to do in the meantime in the bootstrappy type of phase. But also, I think it's interesting how Monero decided to do things because first off, they got almost all their inflation over in a couple of years. Like inflated like shit in the first couple of years. So I guess early holders got a lot of it, whereas later holders, later miners, have proportionally much less of it. But then now their emission schedule is very low. I think it's less than Bitcoin right now. It's trending lower, which is good for, I guess, stability of the asset price and basically returning to that whole fee model type thing. However, Monero does not have a limited supply. It has as I'm sure you know, it has a tail emission. And so that's a very minor subsidy, but a permanent subsidy. And it's kind of acquiescing to the idea of we will never be able to make enough money for security on fees alone. So therefore, we'll always have to have a little bit of inflation doing that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's a talk for a different day because this has already gone way too long. Yeah. But anyway, thanks for joining. Where can people find more about you? I'm sure CoinGeek, right? Is there an author
all
page
over
there?
The place? Yeah. So if you go to CoinGeek.com, you can go to authors. You can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at Kurt Wuckert Jr. And I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. everywhere if you want to hit me up on Telegram or Keybase or whatever. But you can just Google me. You can find me most places, and I'm very happy to chat over DM or publicly.
Yep, slide into his DMs, people. So thanks everyone for listening. Obviously subscribe everywhere, including on Spotify and all the podcast places for the audio only stuff. cointr.ee/the desert links if you want to give a donation or leave some messages for other stuff. And check out the sponsors. They'll be in the link, especially Bitrefill. Use the code DCN to get an account. And live off of crypto today. Unless you have BSV, which for some reason they don't support, but that's a different thing. Or BCH for that matter. But anyway, thanks so much for being on, and I guess we'll see you guys in 8 days. Podcast. Bye-bye, guys.
See you later.